everyone. It's Dr. Shelley Plumb again, and we are back. I am here with Wendy Payne. How are you, Wendy?
I'm well. Thank you for having me here today.
Oh, gosh, it's a pleasure to have you. You know, the first thing with regards to finances that I am extremely curious about, because I have my 3 kids, is planning for college. College, how necessary is it to plan ahead for college, in your opinion?
It's very necessary, especially, it depends on your family dynamics, but it is very necessary to start as soon as possible.
Yes.
But you also want to be saving, you don't want to be saving to the detriment of your cash flow. You don't want to be going into debt.
That's true.
In order to save for college or for retirement for that matter. But the sooner the better. We do have limited time between now and when your young child is off to college. So the more time you have to plan for that, the better.
So, I'm curious. My children are a little older, in teenage years, but I do have friends that are out there, and we have viewers that are out there that have small children. So my first question is when? When should a parent start planning for their future for college for their child?
Again, as soon as possible. They could plan the moment the child is born.
Yes.
And a social security number is assigned. There's the ability to open a college 529 savings investment account.
Okay.
In which case, really, you could start that before the child is born. You would essentially do a beneficiary change once he or she arrives.
Okay, so that brings up a good point, because you just mentioned, one of the avenues that we could pursue as far as college planning. What are the vehicles with regards to, saving money for college? Can you share with our viewers?
Yes, so typically everyone out there, I'm sure, is aware of the custodial accounts or the UTMA accounts, where you would have a parent custodian for junior,
right,
per se. You would put money in there, whether it's through a bank account or whether it's through an investment account. That's one method that still exists today.
Okay.
However, the College 529 plans, and 529 references the IRS tax law code, essentially has sort of 2 legs to it, if you will. There's the prepaid tuition leg, where you can essentially prepay the tuition today.
Right.
And avoid,
right,
basically avoiding tuition inflationary increases. Then you also have the 529 investment account, where you can, essentially it's an investment account where the parent is the owner and the child is the beneficiary. Those grow tax-free if the distributions are made for college, whether it's tuition, room, board, books, transportation, that kind of thing. The distributions are also on a tax-free basis.
So, with all those options that we have available to us as parents, and there are options there, your firm, for example, helps to coach, and I'm assuming you look at individual cases and are able to put them on the right path so that they are ready when the time comes.
Absolutely, and this is where knowing your client is very important.
Yes.
So if you're a family that all of your family, all of the generations, they've all gone to Notre Dame or to Clemson or some other school,
right,
and this is where my child's going to go. That's just sort of in their DNA per se. Then maybe the prepaid tuition plan is the way to go.
Right.
Because you're locking in, again, today's college tuition rates to be utilized later on down the road. However, if having control of the investment account, again on the 529 investment college savings plan side, having control of those funds is important to you. And being able to distribute that, again, if your young child will go to another school, whether it's a public school, a private school, in-state, out-of-state, then the 529 plan is something that we definitely go down the road of usually recommending that in that scenario.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I'm just curious. I mean, and I have a sense for what could happen, but I'm curious to get your take on it. If we don't plan, say we, just kind of ignore it, and what worst case scenario, would happen? You still want your child to go to college, but you haven't prepared properly. What would parents who have done that be looking at?
Well, I think worst case scenario personally would be the child doesn't go to school.
Okay.
That
right.
would be worst case scenario in my opinion.
Detrimental.
The other worst case scenario, or other methods that families use to cover the college expense when the time comes, there are loans. Many people may go and get a line of credit, home equity line of credit on their home, and they may utilize that to pay for college. That again, can become tricky and
Yes.
risky over the long term.
Right.
That's, again, you need to work with a professional on that to weigh out the pros and cons of that. They may go into debt to pay for college. There are other ways to pay for college when the time comes as well. There are scholarships, there are grants, other forms of financial aid. If the family, or if the child, student is eligible, subsidized loans where the interest is deferred until after college graduation.
Okay, that's good. So there are options that are out there. And actually, that brings up a very good point, just kind of transitioning into another topic, is retirement. I mean, I know, and I have been guilty of thinking that I needed to do this, and this is why I'm bringing this up, is retirement. And, do you plan for retirement, or do you set money away for the college fund? So let's switch gears into retirement. How important is it for us as parents, as consumers, to prepare for ourselves to retire?
It's vitally important. We all have the same asset here that's diminishing, and that's time. All of
Yes.
us, every day, we're one day closer to, closing our eyes for the last time. When planning for retirement, I urge my clients to tell me, what is your definition of retirement?
Okay.
Traditionally speaking, it may be, I'm finished working. Our definition of retirement, and we share this with our clients, is what does retirement mean to you? What will you be doing with your time? If that means you want to work, you want to open a catering company, you want to do whatever it is you want to be doing, it's because you're doing that because you love doing that, not because you're financially required to do that. You have retirement income coming in from other sources, whether it's Social Security, pensions, your IRAs, retirement plans, and other investment accounts. You're working because you want to. Maybe you're traveling or volunteering or spending time with your grandchildren. So what is your definition of retirement? That's the first place to begin, and then the plan evolves from there.
And that brings up another question, very similar to the college planning. For my children, for example, when would I coach them to start thinking about retirement and not necessarily think they're going to retire at this moment, but putting money away for retirement?
When they start earning income.
Is that right?
Because, again, you want to have them developing good habits.
Right.
Right? So if they have a part-time job, whether it's at the country club or at a restaurant or whatever it may be, having them set aside a certain amount of every paycheck into retirement. They could put it into a Roth IRA, traditional IRA. If they're working part-time, they may not be eligible for a retirement plan through their employer, such as a 401k. However, there are other methods that they could set aside monies for retirement, even if the employer-sponsored plan is not available to them.
That's true. And I'm just curious about one other thing is, I'm sure in your literature that you read and your clients that you service and all of your training, have you seen success stories where youngsters, for the most part, had been doing that? And you just told me a story a few moments ago about one, I think a teenager that's putting $50 away. Tell us a success story. Have you seen that develop into a plan where they could retire comfortably at a comfortable age?
Yes, but I'm going to use a different scenario or different
Okay.
case study, if you will.
Sure.
We have a client who she's been saving for a long time, and it just started a little bit when she was younger. Maybe it was $50 or $100 a month, and she just started with that, and every month it just was directly coming out of her bank account, just like you may automatically pay your cell phone bill, that kind of thing.
Right.
And it was invested in mutual funds, and she worked with an advisor. Because again, you don't have to have millions of dollars to have, to warrant the need of working with an advisor.
True.
More people need advisors than maybe they realize. And so she saved over a long period of time, and as her income went up, she found that she was able to increase her savings rate. She was now putting more away and more aside. And so here we fast forward, she is now 61 years old, and she came to Sterling and I and says, I want to talk about retirement. I'd like to retire in maybe 3 or 4 years from now. Am I able to do that financially? And we were able to show her, look, because you started saving many, many years ago and you were consistent in your savings, you actually could retire now if you wanted to.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So that's what we're looking at, right? A lot of PlumbTalk viewers have reached out to us. We hear questions, we hear people talking, and one thing that we are hearing, and one woman asked me to ask you, so forgive me, but I'm going to pass along the question here, is she's struggling as a woman who has been divorced and, really devastated for the most part, starting out from ground zero. And she is curious, in your opinion, do you see women in the financial arena struggle in unique ways?
I do. Aside from her recent divorce, when it comes to retirement planning, I feel that women face our own unique set of challenges. Statistically, we live longer.
Yes.
That means we have more years to plan for, and our dollars have to stretch out for a longer period of time. Also, we tend to be more conservative investors. If I had to stack up the male versus female clients that only invest or put money into CDs and in savings accounts, we tend to be far more conservative, and that's good in some cases, but in other cases, you're at a high risk of not outpacing inflation.
That's true.
We also tend to take time out of the workplace to raise families and take care of aging parents. And so when we're taking time out of the workplace, that means we're not contributing to our retirement plans, or maybe if we are fortunate enough to have a pension through our employer, then maybe it's not at a high enough benefit than it would have been had we not taken time out of the workforce. The other thing is that we tend to put the needs of others first. So women especially will take that extra, $100 a month or whatever the case may be, and they will not put that into their own retirement account. They will put it into the college 529 plan, for example. And while that's great for their child, that's very helpful, but it's to the detriment of their own retirement plan, and that increases their risk of becoming a financial burden to their child, which is the number one concern that I hear from my clients, at least. I don't want to be a financial burden to my child.
I've heard that, honestly. I can relate. I've heard that come from my father's mouth before. Mm-hmm. And I personally, now that my children are getting older, I have had those thoughts go through my head as regards to me, on them. So I understand that. So with all of those unique financial concerns that women have, what are some solutions that you can recommend?
Well, the solutions are: make sure that you're contributing to your retirement account. You want to do that whether it's, again, through your employer, whether it's your own traditional IRA, Roth IRA, whatever it may be, your own retirement account. You have to set aside, put yourself first, essentially.
Yes.
It sounds selfish, but it really is a selfless thing to do, to make sure that I want to make sure I'm not going to be a burden to my child later. Also, the other thing is to work with an advisor so that you know how you're positioning the savings dollars that you're putting aside in retirement, and also if you're also to contribute to the college 529 plan and such.
Right. So really, you mentioned the word selfish. It's really not selfish.
No.
If you look at it short term, maybe it might seem that way, but if you look at the long term, it really is not, because you're reducing the financial burden on your children indirectly, and really making your end of life much more comfortable.
Exactly.
Am I right?
Yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, we're going to return with your partner in just a second.
Great.
We'll be back with Sterling Neblett, and we're going to talk about financial planning. We're going to talk about investments. How are you, Sterling?
I'm doing great.
Well, great. And we're going to switch gears. We're going to switch gears to investing. Okay, so I am curious, and like I was saying in the introduction today, is I was sitting there at my computer because I was preparing for our talk today, and there are so many terms that are bouncing around with regards to investment. So can you mention and maybe even define some of the more common terms when it comes to investing?
Sure. So I thought we'd start with stocks.
Okay.
And so when you're buying a stock, you're buying a piece of a company. So let's
Okay.
use Apple, for example.
Right.
So today, if you had, for a little less than $132, you could be an owner of Apple.
Okay.
And that sounds amazing. $132, I could own
I
a
would
piece.
love to own Apple.
Right. So, for $132, you really would be an owner of that company. And you would buy a share of that company, which is considered stock or equities, and you would participate in the revenues and the growth. Hopefully that company, Apple, would grow. I'm not saying it will,
Yes.
but hopefully the idea is with time, you buy into good companies and you grow with them. So your $132 could turn into maybe $400, 20 years down
Gotcha.
the road.
Okay.
And so, that's this, to put what a stock is simply. A bond, a bond is a loan. So when let's use Apple again, let's say Apple wants to raise capital, they want to raise money, maybe they want to buy another company, maybe they want cash for other purposes, they can issue bonds. So they issue a loan, which you buy. When you're buying a bond, you're lending money to the company. And usually that has a term. So let's just say, for this example, a 10-year term, and they pay you interest, each year for that term, and then you get your money back. So that's really, that's what a bond is.
Okay, that makes sense, because I was a little confused with that issue with the bond.
Yeah.
So is there any other terms that you would
Sure. So when most retail investors invest, a lot of times they're not buying individual stocks and bonds, but they are buying them indirectly. So they'll invest in maybe an ETF, an exchange-traded fund, or a mutual fund, which you've probably heard of, and maybe you invest in yourself. And what those are is they're a basket of these different securities. So they're a basket of stocks or a basket of bonds. And on the ETF side, they usually follow an index. So your most common index is the S&P 500. Most people have heard, when you hear what is the market doing today, most people are referring to the S&P 500. So
Right.
that is a basket of 500 stocks. And when you're investing in the S&P 500, which you can do through an ETF, you're investing in those 500 stocks, and your money's going to move with the prices of those 500 stocks.
Oh, I
And then
understand.
on the flip side, you can have an ETF with bonds. So again, they'll invest in a basket of bonds, and you're going to receive the interest payments and the various terms of those bonds or loans. And then on the mutual fund side, you typically have more active managers. So rather than buying the S&P 500, which is you're going to get the performance of the market, in a mutual fund, you're putting your money with a manager with the idea of they will select individual stocks and hopefully outperform that S&P 500. Maybe that's their objective, is to outperform the S&P 500, or maybe their objective is to have similar performance but with less risk. So these are all measurements you want to look at when you're investing.
I love that. So you're kind of breaking it down into manageable terms. So that's one term, and I'll be the first to admit that confuses me, and I know it's confused some of our viewers that have reached out, is the concept of asset allocation.
Yes.
What does that mean exactly?
Very good question. So asset allocation is essentially you're putting your eggs in multiple baskets.
Okay.
You always
That
hear,
makes sense.
you hear the phrase, you don't want all of your eggs in one basket. And the reason for that is because...
And you agree with that?
I agree completely. And the reason for that is you don't want when your eggs are in one basket, you're taking a lot more risk. So
Okay.
what you want to do is you want your eggs in multiple baskets. You want to diversify your risk, which means you may put some money in stocks. You may put a chunk or sliver of your portfolio in large cap stocks. Now keep in mind, in the arena of stocks, there's a lot of subcategories. So you have large companies, mid-sized companies, small companies, international companies. So you want money in all of those different subcategories. And then you have the bond side. Well, on the bond side, you have different subcategories as well, and you want to spread your money across. And what that allocation, in determining that allocation, it's really based on your personal goals.
Okay.
If you're close to retirement, let's say you're 5 years from retirement, you can't afford to have as much volatility in your portfolio. You can't afford to have as much risk. So in that case, you typically have more money allocated to the bond side of things, or lower volatility securities or investments, versus stocks, which tend to be more volatile and higher risk.
That actually brings up an important concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, and it seems to be what your company and a lot of financial planners do, is you look at the individual. You look at where they're at in their life and their assets that they have, and you can direct them on how to allocate those assets. So how does that relate to the term that I have heard, and I read this morning, on diversification?
So when we look at each individual, we look at their entire financial picture, and,
Okay.
it usually is quantifiable to a current cash flow need, or a future cash flow need, and then a legacy. And so when we do all of the math, and we determine what we call your family benchmark. So let's say you we do the calculations, and what you specifically need on your investments is 4.3% annualized to achieve everything you want to achieve in life. And so what we'll do is we'll construct a portfolio with the objective of achieving your family benchmark with the least amount of risk. So in that case, the S&P 500 is irrelevant. I don't want to take your portfolio and be comparing it to the S&P 500 because who cares what the S&P 500 does?
True.
We want to compare your portfolio to your specific family benchmark, which is unique to you, and that's what's important to you. So if we're outperforming or performing at your family benchmark, you know that you can achieve everything you want in life.
And you set yourself up, and I have done this the opposite direction, but the way you're saying it, you set yourself up for success from the very beginning by looking at all that. Am I correct?
Absolutely, and you're really managing risk. I mean, people take on too much risk, and we learned, 2008, when we had the market drop 39% or peak to trough, 50%. If you were 5 years or a few years from retirement and you were in all stocks and you lost half of your money, that means you would have had to work longer, save more, really change your lifestyle. And the point is, if you didn't need to take on that risk,
yes,
then why do it? Why shoot for 8, 9% if all you need is 4.3%?
that is true. That is true. I'm listening to you, and the concept of financial planning is really just popping into my brain. And for some, and myself included, sometimes that financial planning term has had a negative connotation, and I'll be honest with you, because growing up, I always heard my parents talking about it. It was almost, I conceptualized that it meant lack. And that is not what I'm hearing from you. What does financial planning mean to you?
So financial planning to us means really organizing and looking across your entire financial landscape.
Okay.
Looking at your insurance policies for risk management, and also cash flow. Are you paying too much in those? Do you even need those policies? Looking at your investments are more the gas in the engine, if you will. That's what's going to get you from point A to point B, but you need to really have a roadmap of how to get there most efficiently. Looking at your taxes, I mentioned risk management, and really drilling down to college. I know Wendy spoke about college savings.
Yes.
Well, how much do you put into college versus your own retirement? Where can you save in taxes? Should you put money into this retirement plan, not only because you're saving for retirement, but maybe it saves you a significant amount in taxes right now. And then down the road, when you're taking money from your portfolios, you can really fine-tune it to keep you in the lowest tax bracket. So it really encompasses everything that has to do with you financially. And it is a tough subject. Some people don't like to talk about their finances. Many people don't think they're prepared, and they don't realize how prepared they are. And so what we help do is we help give clients their peace of mind. They come into our office, and we don't sugarcoat things. We want them to know, can you retire at 65, 63? In some cases, like Wendy mentioned, we have a client, she wasn't even sure she could retire at 70, and she was 63. She came in, she was a client of ours. We went over the review and we said, hey, you could retire tomorrow. You could call your employer and quit today, and you're fine for retirement.
Great. That's
and that was a
fantastic.
great. She was clueless, and that just gave her such peace of mind, and just imagine that weight being lifted off your shoulders.
I love what you just said, that term, peace of mind, because it really, that's what it is. When we kind of pull the wool over, away from our eyes, and we're able to actually see what's going on, like that woman that you just related to the story. Well, my goodness, she could retire. How about, and we talked a little bit about this with Wendy, how about our younger generation? Financial planning, with regards to financial planning, for those, not necessarily even the younger generation, anybody who is not doing it now. Is financial planning for everyone, first of all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Financial planning is for everyone, and it doesn't mean you have to be wealthy. It's a matter of, and part of it, a big part of it is education. Earlier you just get educated on cash flow. Should I be buying this item that's, or do I need this item?
Right.
or should I cut back on spending here to, save, and keep in mind, time is very valuable. The more time you have, that's the most valuable thing. And so the earlier you start, the less you need to put in, because you have that time factor. If you start late, you might have to save a lot more. But any savings or retirement planning or financial planning is very important. The earlier you do it, the more you try to get educated. There's a lot of free sources out there, and the better you're going to be off.
That makes tremendous sense. It really does. Yeah. So for people out there, they're listening to this, and they're like, you know what, I'm not doing anything right now, and I agree, I need to do something. Where should they start? What are a couple steps that they might just start to get their feet wet?
One would be, contact a local certified financial planner.
Okay.
You can look it up, cfp.net. They have a directory. I think you can look it up by
And they
region.
should be certified. Am I right?
Yeah, certified financial
Okay.
planner,
Mhm.
just because I feel they have the education and to really advise you correctly. What you don't want to get caught up with is, and unfortunately in our industry, there's a lot of salespeople. They're selling products, and you want to work with someone that's going to be a fiduciary. They're acting on your best interests, and they're not selling you a product. They're there to educate you and consult you. And that's, first and foremost, I would recommend, sitting down with that individual. Usually the first meeting is free. They're not going to charge you the first meeting, and if anything, you'll get something out of that first meeting in terms of, getting directed and, being sent in the right direction.
That's great. That's fantastic. I'm curious, having sat at my computer and been completely confused by some of the facts that are out there, are there traps that our viewers should be wary about with regards to financial planning? Is there anything that they should be watching out for or avoid?
It's hard to say. Every unique individual, and it depends on, there's so many things out there. What's right for you may not be right for someone else.
That's true, right?
But again, I think the main thing is looking at objective advice, independent, someone that's a fiduciary, meet with them, or look at your fiduciary resources like cfp.net, and looking more at the educational component. You can always reach out to us
Right.
as well.
That's true. That's very true. So fiduciary, can you define that for us?
Fiduciary is someone that's acting in your best interest
Okay.
over anything else.
Not
So-
trying to sell you a product.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a great example is, let's say, I'm an advisor and there's product A and product B.
Yes.
Same exact product. One, I make a 5% commission on. The second one, I make, there's no commission.
Okay.
Well, as a fiduciary, legally has to give you that product B with no commission because it's in your best interest.
I understand. Okay, so it's in our best interest to know that, for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll tell you what, these two have been a wealth of knowledge. Am I right? It has been so educational, especially for me. So, Wendy, I have to know, for our viewers that are out there, and they, loved what you say, is there any words of advice that you would leave them with?
Yes, read, learn, talk to an advisor. We all connect to money emotionally, whether that's a positive emotion or whether it's maybe a little bit of a negative or concerning emotion. Work with your advisor. Your advisor should be educating you, as Sterling said earlier, not just doing the planning, but educating you through the process, because then you're more involved, it's more of a partnership, and that person is really serving as your financial therapist, if you will. Definitely read. There are a lot of resources out there and articles that are informative. That would be be more proactive on your own behalf.
That's wonderful. And you know what, Sterling, you said something earlier that I just loved, peace of mind. Because what we're talking about today is having a peace of mind with regards to financial freedom. So same thing to you, Sterling. What words of advice would you leave with viewers?
My tip would be, do not procrastinate. Even if it's just $10 per month, the slightest little bit, you have time on your side, it can really add up over 30, 40 years. Just get started. I know it's tough to address the situation. Many people don't think they have enough to get started. But really, just take that first step and open up a retirement plan, even if it's putting $5 a month. take a look at, some of the free resources on the web, read some books, and start to learn about, financial planning, retirement planning, and just, just don't procrastinate.
Thank you. On behalf of the entire PlumbTalk team, I would like to thank you both for joining us today. Now, Wendy, I'm going to leave it with you. If our viewers are out there and they are like, wow, I just want to know more about what you do, and they want to contact one or both of you, where would you point them?
They can go to our website, centurionwealth.com, and actually on our website we have a resource library that has many, many videos, articles and such that are educational. They can reach us by telephone, 571-765-1890, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you to both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Really.
you.
And thank you to all our viewers.